Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you today about Australia in the Vietnam War. Okay, most people don't know that Australia was involved in that war, but Australia was definitely involved in the Vietnam War. They had sent nearly 50,000 of their soldiers to go and fight in the Vietnam War, and 520 of them did not make it back. 520 Australians lost their lives fighting for the soldiers next to them. Whether if the soldiers next to them were American or New Zealand or Australian or Thai or Filipino, all those countries were in the Vietnam War, or South Korean. South Korea was definitely in the Vietnam War. And Australia, they came and they were there from the years 1962 to 1972. Okay, the first thing the Australians did was they did combat advisory role. They advised the indigenous people of Vietnam, called the Montagnards. They're actually the original inhabitants of Vietnam, the Montagnards. And the Montagnards were trained in guerrilla warfare and how to counter the Viet Cong's guerrilla tactics. And the Australian Army trained them and trained them very efficiently. The highest medal that Australian soldiers can get is the Victoria Cross. And of the Army advisement team that advised the Montagnards, 4 Australian soldiers won the Victoria Cross. So God bless these brave Australian soldiers for their service in Vietnam. And this is not about whether if the war was justified or not. I personally did not like the idea of the Vietnam War. Vietnam's an ally to the U.S. and to Australia now. That's in the past. Okay? But we need to remember the soldiers on all sides that fought. Okay. Now, the Australians, they admired the courage and the tenacity of the Americans that were in Vietnam. They didn't think they were monsters or rapists or anything else. But Australia had a lot more experience at that time countering guerrilla warfare because they'd been in Malaysia, countering a communist insurgency in the jungles of Malaysia. And for America, it had been over 10 years since the Korean War happened. So a lot of Americans, particularly the younger American soldiers, did not know what guerrilla warfare was because it had been so long ago. So the Australians, even though they admired the American soldiers, they were relieved when they had their own province to patrol and deal with. It belonged to Vietnam, obviously, but the province that they patrolled and dealt with, that their responsibility was, I should say, it was the Phuoc Tuy province. Phuoc Tuy. And that's the name of the province. I can't control what that province is named. And they played a role in a key battle there. The NVA and Viet Cong attacked their base, and they did not expect that to happen. But the Australians sent patrol units out to get the Viet Cong, and it was called the Battle of Long Tan. And the Australians that came to the Vietnam War, some were volunteers and some were draftees. The ones that were conscripted or drafted were usually 20 years of age, and they were called national servicemen. Okay, and there were national servicemen as well as volunteers fighting in that battle, in the Battle of Long Tan. But the volunteers and the national servicemen didn't discriminate against each other. The volunteers respected the national servicemen. They thought that the national servicemen were their equal. And one of them was a young private in the Australian Army named Jim Richmond, and he barely survived the Battle of Long Tan, and the reason he was able to survive is because where he was bleeding heavily, he packed the wounds with mud. And he still has some bad dreams from the Battle of Long Tan. Like, his comrades around him were dying, and he was telling them, this is only a dream, we're going to eventually wake up. And that dream stays with him. So, he was dreaming, telling his soldiers that this is only a dream. And that dream just stays with him. And God bless him for his service. And the reason the Australians like to fight by themselves is because the Australians were a lot more quiet when countering the Viet Cong. They moved quiet a lot more in a stealthy manner, used a lot more patience, mainly because a lot of the soldiers had prior experience fighting guerrillas, more so than the Americans. The Americans did amazing things in the Vietnam War. I'm not bashing them at all. I'm just saying and quoting what a lot of the Australian soldiers had said. Because the U.S., They killed more Viet Cong, but they also suffered more casualties than the Australians did. The Battle of Long Tan, the Australians were greatly outnumbered, but the Australians still won the Battle of Long Tan. They won the battle. They also, during the Vietnam War, patrolled a lot of tunnels that were dug by the Viet Cong, and those were dangerous jobs because if you opened a door, sometimes, and particularly if you went to a lower floor on the tunnel, if you opened a door, if you went in head first, a metal pipe that an NVA or Viet Cong soldier could use could spike you through the throat, and if you went in feet first, it would the pipe would spike you through the chest or the stomach. And if it spiked you through the throat, you couldn't pull it out and cover your wound because the spike was lower than the door and the space between the wall and the door. So either way, if it got you in the throat, you were dead. So it was a very dangerous job. And so these brave men, they deserve our recognition and they deserve our respect. The Australian Navy was there as well as the Australian Air Force. The Australian Navy bombarded a lot of key NVA and Viet Cong positions. And then they also sent a helicopter unit that provided ground support to the U.S. and Australian soldiers. The Australian Special Forces, the SAS, they were there as well. And they won the Battle of Long Tan, and they probably should have not won that battle because they were vastly outnumbered, and against a tough and determined enemy. But the Australian soldiers fought bravely and tenaciously and won that battle. So we need to remember that they were there in the Vietnam War. We need to remember and recognize their service. So anyways, I got a screaming cat right here coming to get in. Everybody say hello to my cat. That's one of the cats. She was a stray and picked her up. So anyways, God bless the brave Australian soldiers, and hope everyone's doing well. Take care. God bless, and bye-bye. Bye-bye.